They told me he wouldn't make it through the week. They were wrong. They said we didn't belong on that land anymore. They were right about that part, because someday, that land would belong to me. I'm going to tell you about the day a lie saved 2 lives. But first, you need to understand something. When I was 12 years old, I discovered that some people are born to die, and others are born to stop it from happening. I didn't know in that moment that I was about to find out which one I was. The smell of dew on warm earth, the soft chirping of morning birds, and the hum of cicadas slowly waking at dawn. That was my world. But in a few hours, it would all come crashing down, a forgotten patch of land far from any road signs or big cities. Most people drove right past it without a second glance. But to me, it was everything. It was home. That afternoon, the wind changed. It wasn't the kind of wind you feel on your skin. It was the kind you feel in your gut. Cold, sharp, unfamiliar. It swept through the fields in long, dragging gusts that bent the tall grass in strange directions. Even the animals went quiet. No birdsong, no barking dogs. Just the rustle of something wrong. The sky had turned a heavy shade of gray, like wet wool stretched from one end of the horizon to the other. I remember standing on the porch, barefoot on the old wooden planks when I saw my father step out of the barn. He looked tired. His shoulders had begun to slump more in recent months. His hands, once steady as iron, shook now when he poured his coffee. But his spirit never wavered. He wiped his brow with the back of his hand, pulled his hat low to shield his eyes from the wind, and glanced toward me. Just a glance, but it said everything. He gave me a half smile and said, "Stay inside, son. I'll just fix that last fence line and be right back." And that was it. No big farewell, no moment of importance. Just a fence post, a piece of land, and a promise to return. I watched him walk away across the field, boots dragging, coat flapping behind him like a flag. One step at a time, until the wind swallowed him. And then, the sound. Not a scream, not a gunshot, just the snap of splintering wood, and a heavy thud. I didn't understand it then. Not completely. I ran out into the field calling his name. No answer. Just the sky pressing down, and silence that felt like forever. They say you always remember the last words someone speaks. I remember his. Not because they were profound, but because they were unfinished. I'll be right back. The next morning, the sun rose like it didn't care what had happened. The rooster crowed. The breeze moved through the curtains, and a truck I didn't recognize pulled up the gravel road. It wasn't friends. It wasn't neighbors coming to offer help or prayer. It was them, the landowners. 2 men in clean shirts and cold expressions. Their boots didn't even pick up dust. One of them stepped forward and looked straight past my mother, as if she weren't even there. He said, flat and hollow, "Without a man to work the fields, you're no good to us." That was it. Not a single mention of the years my father spent waking before dawn, plowing their land, fixing their barns, training their horses, nothing. Just the ticking of a pocket watch and a voice that said, "You've got till sundown to be gone." Mama stood frozen, holding her apron in both hands. Her mouth moved like she wanted to speak, but nothing came. I wanted to yell, to throw something, to hit someone, but I just stood there, still, like the wind had rooted my feet in place. We packed what little we had into 2 flour sacks and a cracked suitcase, clothes, some dried beans, and my father's Bible. That was it. No photos, no keepsakes, no time, just survival. Mama tied her scarf tight around her head and led the way down the path toward the train tracks, but I turned back, just once, and there he was, Buck, standing at the fence where the paddock met the field, his head pressed gently against the wooden slats, ears flicking nervously in the wind, eyes wide, wet. He didn't make a sound, at first, just watched. Then a soft, aching whimper came from his throat, low and long, like he knew, like he understood what was happening, and I broke. I wanted to run to him, to rip down that fence with my bare hands, to throw myself over the rails and cling to his neck until someone had to drag me away. But I didn't. I couldn't. Mama called my name once. Not loud, not angry, just a reminder that we didn't belong here anymore, that grief didn't matter to men who only cared about profit, that crying wouldn't fix a thing. So I turned back. I walked forward, and I left a piece of myself behind. That was the day I learned something a boy should never have to learn, that sometimes the world breaks you, not in one big shatter, but in 100 quiet ways, and you have no choice but to keep walking. I remember gripping the handle of that suitcase so tightly, the skin split between my fingers. I didn't say a word for the rest of that walk. Mama just hummed softly, a hymn I used to hear her sing when she thought no one was listening. And Buck? He stayed there at that fence, watching, waiting, until the wind carried us out of sight. Growing up didn't come with a party. No candles, no applause, no "you did it, son." It came with cracked hands, a sore back, and long, lonely walks home from places that barely tolerated my presence. I became a man in borrowed boots and faded shirts too small for my arms. There were no shortcuts, just work. Hard, honest, unforgiving work. I hauled bricks under a sun that burned the skin off my neck, mixed cement until my shoulders trembled, washed dishes in diners where the radio was always too loud and the men too tired to tip their hats. No one asked my name. They just pointed and I moved. That was the deal. You worked. You kept your head down. You stayed invisible. My clothes never matched. My pockets were mostly empty. But my heart, it held something that money couldn't touch. A promise, a memory, a name. Buck. I thought about him every day. In the silence between shovel loads, in the scrape of cutlery on chipped porcelain, in the cold walk home when the only sound was gravel underfoot. Some nights, I'd see him in dreams. Not as a colt anymore, but grown, strong, majestic, running free across open land, waiting for me. Other nights I saw him still behind the fence, still watching, still waiting, and I'd wake with my fists clenched and a quiet fire in my chest. Time moved forward, but I stayed in place, growing taller, heavier, harder. But inside, I still felt like the boy who wasn't allowed to say goodbye. I never stopped carrying that day in my body. The day I walked away, the day I left him, and that pain. It became fuel. By the time I was 17, I was stronger than most men twice my age. But the world didn't care. I was just another pair of hands, another forgotten face in a crowd of the forgotten. Then one day the army came calling. The recruiter set up a table outside the county store. He had sharp creases in his uniform and eyes that had seen too much. I lingered near the crates of onions just watching him. He noticed, didn't smile, didn't pitch me a dream. He just looked at me and said, "You ready to fight for something bigger than yourself, son?" I didn't answer at first, because truth was, I'd already been fighting every day since my father fell in that field, fighting against the weight of being nobody, fighting against the feeling that the world had left me behind and didn't plan to look back. But maybe, just maybe, this was a way forward. Not to run, not to forget, but to grow strong enough to return. I signed my name on the dotted line, and when they handed me that uniform, itchy, stiff, and 2 sizes too big, I saw something more than fabric. I saw armor, not just for my body, but for everything I'd carried without protection. Boot camp hit me hard, but I didn't flinch. While others complained, I stayed quiet. While they fell behind on runs, I pushed harder. I wasn't the fastest, not the smartest, but I was unshakable because I wasn't there for glory. I wasn't chasing medals or parades. I was chasing a future where boys like me didn't get laughed at, where a mother wouldn't be forced from her home, where landowners didn't throw lives away like scraps. I fought for the day I'd come back, not bitter, but proud. I wanted to walk past that fence again, to look Buck in the eye if he was still alive, and let him see what I became. Not a servant, not a stray, a man. Deployment came, far from home, different lands, different heat. But the pain, that was familiar. The silence at night, the ache in your bones, the prayers said under breath. I carried Buck's name on a scrap of cloth in my breast pocket, wrote it myself. Buck, I'm still coming. And through all the gunfire and drills, the dust, the rain, the waiting, I never forgot why I was there. Because the world may break boys, but it also gives them a choice. Stay broken, or build yourself back one scar at a time. And I chose to build, to climb, to rise. Every dollar I earned, I sent to Mama. Every letter I wrote, I ended the same. Tell the land to wait, I'm not done with it yet. Years passed, but my promise didn't fade. If anything, it burned brighter. Because once you've fought to become a man, the world can no longer ignore you. Coming home should have felt like victory, the kind they write songs about, flags, applause, a mother's hug, a fire in the hearth. But when my boots hit that old dirt road, when the dust rose behind the bus that dropped me off, all I felt was emptiness. I stood alone. No one was waiting, no familiar voices, no one to ask, "You made it back?" Just wind and dust and silence. The kind of silence that makes you feel like a ghost, like you died somewhere out there, and only your shadow found its way home. The road to the farm was shorter than I remembered, or maybe my legs had grown longer, heavier. I passed the old oak tree where I used to tie Buck's lead rope. It was half dead now, branches like bones, leaves sparse, trembling in the breeze. Every step I took, a memory rose from the ground. Mama's voice calling me in for supper. My father wiping grease from his palms on a worn towel. Buck whinnying in the morning light. Gone. And then I saw it. The farm, or what was left of it. The barn, once red, proud, alive with the sound of animals, was now a sunken skeleton. Its ribs bent inward. Its roof half caved in. The fences leaned in crooked rows like old men with bad knees. Gates hung open or lay rusted in the grass. The house, boarded up. Windows nailed shut like eyes refusing to see what had become of. And weeds, everywhere, tall, wild, unapologetic. I walked through it all slowly, like stepping through a battlefield after the war. My boots crunched over gravel and broken glass. Each creak of wood underfoot felt like a whisper from the past. A question asked in silence. Why did you leave us? But I hadn't left. I'd been pushed out, thrown aside like scraps, and still, I'd come back. I reached the porch and sat down on the top step, ran my hand across the railing where the paint used to be, just flakes now. Then I saw it, half buried in the weeds near the road, a rusted "for sale" sign, still swinging from one bent nail, still hanging on like everything else here. I walked to it, ran my palm over the E letters. The paint came off like ash. It didn't hurt like I expected. It didn't burn, it just settled, like rain on dry ground. I don't know how long I stood there. Could have been minutes, could have been an hour. But I made a decision, not in anger, not out of revenge, not to prove anything to anyone, but because this place, this broken, forgotten, collapsing place, was still mine. Maybe not in paper, maybe not in memory, but in blood, in spirit, in promise. I called the number scrawled on the corner of the sign. A woman answered. She sounded surprised when I said the address, said it had been on the market for years, said no one wanted it, said it wasn't worth much anymore. I said, "It is to me." She paused, then gave me a number. I didn't haggle, didn't flinch. I reached into my coat pocket and felt the envelope, the same one I'd carried through basic, through deployment, through nights too dark to speak, full of years of sweat, of sacrifice, and I said, "I'll take it." When I signed the papers, my hands trembled, not from doubt, but from the weight of it. These were the same hands that once pulled weeds beside my father, that fed a half-dead foal from a cracked bottle, one drop at a time, that dug trenches with blistered palms, that loaded rifles and held comrades and saluted flags, and now they held a pen, signing not just for land, but for memory, for promise, for dignity. I didn't tell anyone, no announcement, no grand reveal. I just walked the land for days, mapping the ghosts, touching the places where moments had once lived, the barn where Buck first stood, the field where Mama picked wildflowers for the table, the fence line where my father taught me how to hammer, without splitting wood. I didn't cry, not because I didn't feel anything, but because some feelings don't need tears. They just need to breathe. I started clearing the field with nothing but a borrowed axe and my bare hands. Each swing was a prayer, each fallen branch a step closer. I wasn't rebuilding the farm, I was reclaiming something the world had tried to take from me. Not revenge, not pride, dignity. The right to stand, to say, this is mine, even if no one believed in it but me. The barn stood exactly where I remembered it, but time had left its fingerprints all over it. The paint, once a proud red, was now more rust than color. The roof sagged at the center, like a man who'd been carrying too much for too long. I stood in front of those old doors, hand resting on the iron handle. I could feel the grain of the wood beneath my palm, dry, splintered, brittle. Still standing, but just barely. When I pushed the doors open, they groaned like they were waking from a long sleep. Or maybe they were protesting, like the past itself didn't want to be disturbed. Inside, it smelled like dust, hay, and old memories. That kind of scent that reaches deep into your chest, triggering things you didn't realize you'd been holding on to. Shafts of light spilled through the cracks in the walls, thin golden beams slicing through the darkness, catching bits of dust that hung in the air like tiny ghosts. Each step I took stirred the silence. The floorboards creaked beneath my boots and the air shifted. Like something knew I was there. I walked slowly, half of me afraid, half of me hoping, and then